Namaskar, everyone. On behalf of Indian Medical Association Gujarat State
Uh,
Branch.
just I want to interrupt you, Urvesh.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Urvesh. In the absence of any national office bearers, we have present Dr. Bipin Bhai Patel. He is a chairman, standing finance committee, IM headquarters.
Yes.
So with the permission of Dr. Bipin Bhai Patel, we may start our CM.
Yes. I first ask Dr. Bipin Patel, sir, shall we call this CME in order? Shall we start, sir? With your permission, Dr. Chandresh Jardos sir is also there. So if you just may allow us to start the CME.
Yes, if Dr. Bipin Bhai is there, almost. Yes. You will start. Yes. There's a message from Dr. Bipin Patel.
Message from the Bipin Bhai. You can start.
Yes. You may start.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Please.
So again, welcome you all on behalf of Indian Medical Association Gujarat State Branch. I, Dr. Urvesh Shah, welcome you all on this web CME on the antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial, a unique group of the drugs. It is unique group of the drugs because when the antimicrobial, they are administered in any of the patient, they primarily act upon the microorganisms. In contrast to the other drugs, when they are administered to the patients, they will primarily act upon the patient cell or human cell or the metabolism. And perhaps this is the reason while prescribing the antimicrobial, the clinicians are least afraid of its side effects. Like in other drugs, side effects may be apparent. For example, anti-diabetic, when they are prescribed inappropriately or excessively, it will cause side effects. When the antihypertensive, they are prescribed inappropriately or excessively, then also it will cause immediate side effects. While in case of the prescription of antimicrobials, they are least afraid of the adverse effects. And perhaps this is the reasons in the last few decades, this antimicrobial has been prescribed in a very high magnitude, excessively, injudiciously, or we can say inadvertently may not be accessed. And this is the reasons today now we are ended with the certain kind of the infections which are being reported, which are highly resistant. They are multi-drug resistance and they are very difficult to treat. And this is a really an alarming situation. And perhaps by identifying this alarming situation, WHO has started the campaign. It's a global campaign for the antimicrobial resistance and its usage awareness. Every year in the month of November, 1 week is celebrated as an antimicrobial awareness by the WHO. I must congratulate this year Indian Medical Association and our Gujarat State branch have picked up the responsibility to spread the awareness for the proper use of the antimicrobial and about sharing the knowledge about how much antimicrobial resistance is harmful to our society. And to talk upon this, today we have very great two eminent speakers, Dr. Mahadev Bhai Desai sir. He is a senior physician. I can say among the senior most physician in the Ahmedabad city. He is a very good academic person. At present, he is practicing as a physician at a HCG multi-specialty hospital. He will talk upon how and what we have to think about antibiotic while prescribing an antibiotic to any of the patient. Our second speaker is Dr. Vipul Shah. He is an infectious disease specialist, also practicing into the in city of the Ahmedabad, and he will show with its slides in presentation with the misuse or the inadvertent use of the antibiotic, which kind of the problems which we may face. So first, I invite Dr. Mahendra Desai sir. Please present your lecture.
Good evening, all of you. Thank you very much. I am a GSB, office bearer, president, secretary, and thank you very much, Dr. Urvesh, for introduction. I'm going to talk about the use of antibiotics judiciously. So this under this banner of WAVE CME microbial resistance, the IMA headquarters has decided to hold many CMEs parallelly, and today we are going to discuss. But the actual Antimicrobial Awareness Week by the WHO is between 18 and 24 November. So we are ahead of the WHO in that sense. And the very theme of the WHO is spread awareness, spread resistance. So this is the logo and theme of WHO. It's very important to understand that what we are talking about antimicrobial covers not only antibiotics, but antivirals, antifungals, and antiparasitic too. Because if you have seen the past 1.5 years, we have used many antiparasitic drugs, repurposed drugs, and antifungal drugs during mucormycosis. So, and antiviral, of course, we have used it. So we need to know that when we talk of antimicrobial resistance, it is comprising of all 4 antibiotics, antivirals, antifungals, and if we use our drugs correctly, then only our medicines will keep working. This is what WHO also reiterates again and again, that the correct use of antimicrobial drugs helps preserve the effectiveness of vital treatments. So on this backdrop, I'm going to talk about the decision making about antimicrobial prescription. Let me disclose that I have nothing to disclose as far as my financial is concerned, and it's very, even if I talk of any drugs, or the good or the bad part of it is purely out of academic consideration and not other personal considerations. Well, do you know that how many cells do we have in our body? And do we know how many microbes do we have in our body? Well, you'll be surprised to know that we have 10 trillion cells. 10 trillions means 10 raised to 12 or 1 lakh crore cells in our body. But if you see the population of microbes in our body, it is 10 times, that is 100 trillions. So you can say that it is the microbes and not the macrobes rule the world. Or we have to be in sync with microbes, otherwise they'll take toll of our health. And we know the biggest threat to our existence today in this world is the antimicrobial drug resistance. Antibiotics were, the first antibiotic was discovered by the Alexander Fleming, and he found out in 1926, and it was commercially available in 1945. But the first resistance was reported in 1947. So within 2 years of discovery of penicillin, the resistance to penicillin was also reported. And why do antimicrobial resistance? Because it's overuse, abuse, and it's misuse. My colleague, Dr. Vipul, will give you the real life examples of how the drugs are abused or misused. But what is important to remember that we are not the only one who are using antimicrobials. Antimicrobials are also used by the other departments and for reasons they know better, for agriculture, for better produce, poultry for better yield, cosmetics, and even detergents also use antibiotics. And that is the reason that we keep on getting the microbial resistance. And another part is that it takes huge amount of money and time to develop new antibiotics. So we have very few new antibiotics approval. In fact, our antibiotics pipeline is absolutely dry. You can see this in the next slides, that if you know the new class of antibiotic drugs approved by FDA for MRSA infection in last 25 years, we only 5 drugs. That is linezolid, quinupristin, dalfopristin. It hasn't come to India to my knowledge. Daptomycin is available, tigecycline is available. And the last in MRSA is the telvancin, which is again, I don't think is available easily here. So for MRSA, we have got the only drugs that we routinely use linezolid. And why I'm telling you this is we have to keep this drug reserved for MRSA. Vancomycin, of course, used that was much earlier available. And for gram-negative infections, we had quinolones 35 years back, and carbapenems, which are the drug right now we use left, right, and center for all gram-negative infections, are also available for last 20 years. And you'll be surprised to know that the last antibiotic that was as a class was approved by FDA was fidaxomicin. Fidaxomicin was the antibiotics before 10 years. And you'll be amused that why this antibiotic was approved. It was approved for antibiotic associated diarrhea. So this is not an antibiotic for routine use. It's a use for antibiotic associated diarrhea. And the only antibiotic class which has come up, though it's not available here, is the teixobactin, which is a new class of antibiotics. And this is an antibiotics for gram-positive infections. So what I'm going to discuss in the next 30 minutes is what are the myths, how do we classify so that we know how to use these drugs, and we should not be using the two drugs having the same mechanism of action. Then checklist before prescribing, pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, what we have learned in our pharmacology, antimicrobial combinations, what we have learned in our microbiology, and what if we use, misuse or abuse or overuse the antibiotics. So first, there are a lot of myths about the antibiotics, not only in the general public, but unfortunately also in our fraternity. We feel that there is a drug for every bug, or there is a pill for every ill. And if you prescribe broad spectrum antibiotic, we don't have to worry about the type of organisms that is involved. And antibiotics are very safe. When Dr. Urvesh said that the antibiotics work only on the cells, means that we are not worried about cells, but that is our half truth, I'm sure. What he meant was that that is the reason and the pretext that the people prescribe without thinking twice. But antibiotics are not safe. In fact, they create more problems, as we'll see later. And what is a real fact about antimicrobial drugs are that antibiotics are not antibiotics. It's not cure-all drugs. I love this T-shirt because it mentions fever is not a sign of ceftriaxone deficiency, as if it's a ceftriaxone deficiency, and that's why we have to give ceftriaxone to every fever. That's not true. Antibiotics are not going to work if abscess is not drained, if foreign body is not removed, or nutrition and hydration are not correct. This is what we have learned basics in our first and second clinical terms. But unfortunately, when it comes to the practice scenario, we often forget this. We know it, but we don't practice it. Jante to sab hai, par mante kitne. See, honestly, we must know before putting up our pen, should a patient be prescribed these drugs for these indications: acute gastroenteritis, common cold or influenza-like illness, asymptomatic urinary tract infections, a catheterized patient, and before any diagnostic procedures. How many of these indications would deserve an antibiotic prescriptions? Well, and acute gastroenteritis most often are viral, or common cold are obviously they don't need any antibiotics. Asymptomatic urinary tract infection may be requiring antibiotics. Few patients like the diabetic patients or pregnancy or the immunocompromised patients, maybe we have to attend that, but not otherwise. A catheterized patient is expected to have cells, and just because the patient has catheter need not require antibiotic. Same is for any diagnostic procedures. We do give antibiotic as a surgical prophylaxis, but there are for the definite indications, and there is a definite antibiotic for that. Well, this is something I like the most. One Dr. Neil Fishman said rightly that it takes a minute to write a prescription, but it takes 15-20 minutes, and more than that, the conviction by the doctor not to write a prescription. This is very, very important. It's just patient demands and we prescribe and oblige, but that's not correct. We should not be doing this in the right interest of the academics. So how do we classify antibiotics? We know, we have studied in pharmacology that the antibiotics have the bacteria, and they have different sites and mechanism of actions. Their molecular structures are different, and their spectrum of activities, whether gram positive, gram negative, aerobic, anaerobic. So the overall, we know that every bacterium has a cell wall, there is a cell membrane, there is nucleus which contains lots of proteins and activities going on. So the most important antibiotics that so far we have in our armamentarium are working on the same wall synthesis. So all antibiotics like beta-lactams, we know what, when we say beta-lactams, that bacteria has got a beta-lactam ring, and on that our antibiotics work, and that is why they are called beta-lactam antibiotics. But bacteria have become very smart, and they have developed beta-lactamase enzymes, so that the beta-lactam antibiotics become ineffective. So we have got beta-lactamase inhibitors drugs. All our drugs like tazobactam or clavulinate, they are the beta-lactamase inhibitors drug. So when we say prescribe BL, BLI, what we mean is the beta-lactam and beta-lactamase inhibitors drugs. So beta-lactams, there is no point in combining penicillin, cephalosporins, carbapenems together because they all work on the same place. And there are drugs which work on the metabolism of the bacterium, that is the drugs that we know, sulfonamide, trimethoprim, they work sequentially, and that is why they are a good drug pharmacodynamically. Then drugs which are under protein synthesis, like the macrolides, clindamycin, linezolid. Now we know that there is no point in describing these drugs together, right? And drugs like the polymyxins, our biggest armamentarium, our brahmastra these days for the gram-negative infections, they work on the cell membrane. You know the difference between the cell wall and the cell membrane now. Now, what is important, this is very, very important, that we must spend few minutes. Antibiotic prescription should be a conscious prescription and not just a knee-jerk reactions. We must keep in mind the three factors: the drug factor that we are going to prescribe, the bug factor, the organisms which we think is under questions, and the host factors or the patient. So amongst the drug factors, we have to think of whether it's a bacteriostatic drug or a bactericidal drug. If the patient is immunocompetent and infection is mild, there is no reason to prescribe bactericidal drug. Bacteriostatic drugs will suffice. But in a critically ill patients, obviously we are going to prescribe bactericidal drugs. Now, whether we are using a particular antibiotic for a therapeutic purpose or a prophylactic purpose is very, very important. If you are using for prophylactic purpose, it is for a given indication for a given time. And even therapeutic antibiotics are also for a definite time. When we use for surgical prophylaxis, most of the surgeries, we do the surgery, before that the surgeon prescribe the antibiotic. These antibiotics are mainly for the infection that might introduce at the time of incision. So the most common organisms that are expected to produce infections because of the contamination of the skin or the incision site are the Staph aureus, coagulous negative staphylococci like Staph epididymis or Staph amyloidoticus or enterococci. So these are the organisms for which the most of the bodies, like whether it's an Infectious Disease Society of America, they've suggested earlier it used to be only cefazolin. But now we know that even cefazolin also may not work in some situations. So maybe either cefazolin 2 grams, cefuroxime 1.5 gram, clindamycin 900 milligram, or ampicillin sulbactam 3 grams, or vancomycin 1 gram. These are the only antibiotics this will be prescribed if you are prescribing as a prophylaxis for the surgery. When we say prophylaxis for surgery, it is usually a single dose, and that too should be given 1 hour before the incision is put. Not that the patient receives the antibiotics previous night or early morning and the patient is shifted to the operation theater and the surgery started. If the antibiotics are should have maximum concentration at the time of putting the incision, that is the very logic. If we use vancomycin, then it should have been started 2 hours before, because we need to give it in infusion form and it reaches by 1-2 hours. So for vancomycin, maybe we should have started 2 hours. All other drugs should be given and should have completed 30 minutes before procedures. And when we say prophylaxis, it should not be more than 24 hours. If the operation is beyond 6 hours, we may give the second dose, but otherwise single dose suffice. Only in case of bypass, we need second or third dose. Then the bug, gram positive, gram negative, aerobes. Somebody is making the arrows, please don't do that. It disturbs and distracts. Gram positive or gram negative organisms is an aerobe or anaerobe, whether it's a one organism or polymicrobial organisms, and whether it's a local infection or systemic infections. And are we dealing with the real infections or just there is a colonization? So if it is a one organ, we know that there are certain infections like diabetic foot or intra-abdominal infections or aspiration pneumonia, we are going to have polymicrobial infections. But barring that, most of the infections are usually by 1 or 2 organisms, and we did not give a very broad spectrum antibiotic. Same way, if it is a colonizations, we will later about that. So next is whether it's a gram positive infections, gram negative infections, or anaerobic infections we are suspecting. Depending on that, we should be choosing the antibiotic. If it's a gram positive infections, like the upper respiratory infections, skin and soft tissue infections, we should be prescribing any one of these antibiotics like penicillins, oral ones, cephalosporins, macrolides, tetracyclines, or newer quinolones like levofloxacin or moxifloxacin. Though the linezolid and vancomycins are also working on the gram positive infection, they should be reserved because they are for exclusive indications, and we have got good drugs let me remind you that linezolid is more often abused or overused than the rightly used, because linezolid is good for MRSA, but for other organisms other than MRSA, I think cephalosporins are better than linezolid. So linezolid is a favorite drug by few, but that should not be used. We should prevent the temptation of using these drugs. Gram-negative infections, aminoglycosides, quinolones, extended spectrum penicillins like piperacillins, then cephalosporins, the second, third, and fourth, or the fifth generations, carbapenems, and chloramphenicol. These are the drugs for gram-negative infections. And for anaerobic infections, we have got metronidazole, clindamycins, carbapenems, and chloramphenicol. So when we are using one of these drugs like metronidazole, clindamycin, carbapenem, we don't need to cover anaerobic. That's very, very important. And that is what we should keep in. As a general rule, if the infections are above the diaphragm, that's what we have been taught and which holds true for most of the, except the nosocomial infections. If the infections are above the diaphragm, the antibiotics are the organisms are likely to be gram positive. And if the infections are below the diaphragm, like abdominal infections, genitourinary infections, maybe the gram negative organisms are very likely, and you select the drugs accordingly. How to choose an antibiotic? Think globally, but act locally. What we mean by that is we have got to keep in mind what is the antimicrobial sensitivity as well as the antimicrobial resistance in our area, our city, our hospital, our ICU, because it's going to be different from different place to place. So it's very important that we keep in touch with the microbiology department, we involve microbiology department, we involve clinical pharmacy department, and take note of them and use the drugs for the right purpose. Then we go to the host factors. Again, it's very, very important. We have to look at the persons who are going to give the drugs, the immune status. If the patient is immunocompromised, when we say immunocompromised, it does not mean only HIV patients. All patients who are diabetic, patients who are on immunosuppressant drugs, patients who undergone transplantations are on drugs for the lifetime, patients who are having steroids, they're all immunocompromised, right? Then special situation, very, very important. If the patient happens to be pregnancy, we know that certain drugs we just cannot give. In pediatric patients also, we cannot give certain drugs. Elderly, we have to be very careful in choosing a drug, keeping in mind their limited renal and hepatic insufficiency or reserves. And patients having renal failure or liver impairment otherwise, also we have got to prescribe the drugs according to their reports of the liver functions as well as the creatinine. Then if there is a history of recent antimicrobial exposure in the past few days or maybe up to the 1 month, then we have to keep in mind that it's better we avoid cephalosporins and the ampicillins, because it's very likely that they are exposed to these drugs during that hospitalizations. And I'll give you the reasons later why we need to do this. Next important thing is the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamic parameters. This is very, very important that we have to know what is pharmacokinetics. In one word, if you say what is pharmacokinetic, is what body does to a drug. When we swallow a drug, what body does to the drug is called pharmacokinetics. And what drug does to the body is called pharmacodynamics. So when we swallow a drug, we know it follows the absorption, distribution, metabolism, eliminations. Then when the drug goes to the system, it works on the receptors, it have a post-receptor activities and chemical interactions. So whenever we take any drug for that matter, it doesn't apply to only antibiotics, but we restrict to antibiotics. When we take any drug, there's always a maximum concentration of that drug, which is called Cmax. Then the drugs has an area of curve, that means it works. And in antibiotics, you can say there is a minimum inhibitory concentrations which are defined for different antibiotics. And then for a period of time, the drug remains above the minimum inhibitory concentration. That is called MI, minimum inhibitory concentration, area of curve above this. So depending on these, there are different types of drugs. Some antibiotics work when they are in maximum concentrations. Some antibiotics work when they remain maximum time above the mean inhibitory concentration. That is called time dependent. So you should know when you prescribe a drug, am I prescribing a concentration dependent antibiotic or am I prescribing a time dependent antibiotic? And some antibiotics have a post antibiotic effects, like azithromycins. They work even after we stop the course, that works for a longer period because of its post antibiotic effects. So depending on that, we should know that concentration dependent antibiotics are like macrolides, neoquinolones like levofloxacin, moxifloxacin, aminofloxacin. These are the drugs, they work best when we give in a high concentration at one time. Please do not prescribe this drug twice a day, thrice a day. That's not correct. That is not correct. We are not going to get the right dose. Even we don't prescribe the drug in the right concentration, that also amounts to misuse of the drug, right? Likewise, there are antibiotics which work when they are on a longer time, they remain above MIC. So when you give a drug over 3-4 dosages, BID, TID, QID dose, or when we give an injectable one, we always give in infusion form. We give the same drug in 100 ml for over 1 to 2 hours and like 6 to 8 hours. So depend, if you give these drugs in an infusion form or divided doses, they work best. So at least even if we take such messages, I think we are going to do a good to the society as a whole. Then next, another important things, a very simple day-to-day problems, but then we often overlook. Our patients feel that all our medicines, they call it vilayati dawa. So they always take with food or milk or with other drugs, which is going to harm all our these medicines. All these medicines, whether penicillin, cloxacillin, ampicillins, azithromycins, or tetracycline fluorones, they definitely are better absorbed when taken on empty stomachs. The drugs with asterisks can be given with food if they are problem of tolerance, but otherwise these medicines definitely have a better absorption. Our predicted dose will come only when we take on empty stomach, because foods, antacids and iron, whenever we give iron preparations, should always be on empty stomach and should be away from any of the food. Same is for antacids. So because all these things either decrease or delay the absorption, but there is also something that there are certain drugs which should we take with antibiotics, with food, like metronidazole, doxycycline, nitrofurantoin, and itraconazole. These are the drugs which should be given with food because of the GI problems. And when we take with food, their absorption is not affected. In fact, itraconazole works better and it has got a better absorption when it is taken with food. Next is, should we give antibiotic combinations? Well, we know that we have got tons of antibiotic combinations. Yes, we do need antibiotic combinations for patients who are seriously ill, patients who have got polymicrobial infections as we just discussed, to achieve synergisms when the drugs are working at two different places in the metabolism of a bacteria, we should give. Then to prevent emergence of resistance, like we give drugs for tuberculosis. And if the patient is immunocompromised or neutropenic, certainly we have to give antibiotics in combinations. And we give these drugs in these indications, definitely we should not delay. It is said that if the patient is in sepsis or pneumonia or meningitis, the moment we diagnose, the moment we sell the blood for the all reports, or we should start in emergency room itself. The chances of better results are there if we are given antibiotics within the first 6 hours of the diagnosis. So do not wait for the antibiotics in critical ill patients with the combinations. But do we need antibiotic combinations for each and every patient? If you just go through the list of available diuretics in Indian pharmacopoeia, I don't think anywhere in the world we have got this many antibiotic combinations. Anything from ofloxacin, tinidazole to cefixime, clavulanate to azithromycin, ambroxol, to doxycycline, serosoviptide, and what not. This is all that they claim. The company wala will say that all these drugs are best and this gives this cover this as well as this, as if our patient is so unfortunate that he has got bacillary dysentery and amoebic dysentery together, right? So that is what they want us to believe. Don't believe them, right? We must look at the PKPD parameters and see whether it is required to be giving, and as a broad spectrum, are we harming the patients? We are disturbing the ecology, and definitely this is one of the reasons for antimicrobial resistance, because they are given in half-hearted dosage for an unindicated cases. So what is the combination of antibiotics which are rational? Like sulfa-trimethoprim are rational as far as their mechanism of action is concerned. If you go by PKPD, still they are not action because sulfa is long acting and trifluridine is short acting, but still they are better because they work that way. Ampicillin, cloxacillin definitely are good. Ampicillin, clavulanate or sulbactam are the BL and BLI, beta-lactam and beta-lactamase inhibitors. So definitely good. Same is piperacillin. These are the only drugs to me are rational combinations. And look at the availability. Quinolone, metronidazole, cefixime, clavulanate, cefixime, ofloxacin, cefpodoxime, ofloxacin, 600 milligram of linezolid and 200 milligram of cefixime, all apples and oranges combinations, or homeopathic dose and human dose, azithromycin, cefixime. This is not something we should ever be encouraging. If we stop prescribing drugs, even if they manufacture, where are they going to? They have to withdraw if we don't prescribe. So that is very, very important. Why I'm be talking about for last 20 minutes for all these things? Because antibiotics are a societal drugs. Antibiotics are not drugs, something like anti-inflammatory drugs. If an anti-inflammatory drug is given, if at all it harms the patient or his family. But if you give an antibiotic, it harms the society as a whole, right? And there are going to be lots of drug-drug interactions. If you see macrolides, we prescribe in respiratory conditions, and macrolides, we also prescribe the allergic drugs as well as the bronchodilators. They are going to prolong QT interval and going to produce cardiac toxicities, torsade pontis, and patients can die suddenly. There are lots of drug reactions. They are going to make our hospital stay because of the nosocomial infections, and the cost is going to be more. But what I'm worried more is the collateral damage. When we are prescribing antibiotics, we are killing or we are sterilizing the bowels or intestines, and that may encourage the super infections. And this is the very reason that the cephalosporins, because of the cephalosporins used, the vancomycin resistance enterococci as well as extended spectrum beta-lactamase are very much seen in this clinical practice. And because of the quinolones overuse, the MRSA incidence has increased. So it's very, very pertinent that we keep in mind the collateral damage. And also we know super infections by Clostridium difficile. We don't look at it, but whenever the patient has fever after the initial control of the fever, or patients has a diarrhea which is mucus or blood, or patient looks toxic or there is leukocytosis, keep in mind it could be Clostridium difficile, and that has to be prevented. And resistance is a big topic by itself. As I said, they are not like NSAIDs. They are the ones which, if we are misused, we are going to affect the society as a whole, and that's what we have to keep in mind all the time. This has happened exactly before about 12 years, when in 2009, a novel beta-lactamase inhibitor in the bacteria was found out, and that was resistant to all the carbamazepine class of drugs. We thought that carbapenem was our brahmastra, and any gram-negative infections will take care of it. But this particular bacteria which can transfer the resistance to other bacteria also, this particular gene, BLA-NDM1 gene, which was initially found in Klebsiella, but that was transferred to other bacteria, and eventually in a very short span of time, most of the gram-negative infections because of this became resistance. It may so happen that one simple gastroenteritis by any of these gram-negative infections can cost us 1 lakh rupees. This scenario is not far from today. So how best we can use the antimicrobial drugs? We must minimize the use. We must differentiate between colonizer and infections. If we get these sputum few organisms, like there are many of them are common cells, right? On urine, catheterized urine sample, we are going to get bacteria. What we need to see, is there a sign of infection? Is the laboratory evidence of infection in the form of leukocytes or Raynaud's ROC is there? Whether the organisms which are not expected, if the blood culture is always should be sterile. But if you find some organisms, definitely we need to attend. But if there is a candida in urine, I am not going to attend. But if there is a candida in blood, certainly it's not a colonizer, it's an infection. So what to differentiate between colonization and infections? We must go for the correct isolation of the organisms, and for that we need microbiologists. How often we talk to our microbiologists? How often we talk to our microbiologists? No, we don't talk to them. We don't talk before or after sending the samples, and they are the key factors. Remember, microbiology is not all that we had whenever we were in our medical colleges. It's totally a different branch, and they are one of the biggest asset to our armamentum as far as the physician practice are concerned. We need to interpret the culture sensitive reports. Even if the urine report says that the quinolones like leofloxacin, ciprofloxacin is sensitive, but if the basic nalidixic is negative, that report, we should interpret that it's that quinolones we should not be giving. Like that, we should know the correct interpretation of the reports, and we should know if the patient is critically ill. We might start with 2 combinations of drugs. The moment we get the reports, we should know when and how to de-escalate the antibiotic drugs. What is important is we must prevent the infections, and preventing the infections, all that we have been doing it for last almost 2 years now. So we know that we must disinfect our hands. But what is important is that we should also disinfect our other instruments that we have been using it, whether it's a stethoscope or any. And when it comes to disinfections, remember the Clostridium difficile spores, they are very resistant to alcohol sanitizer. So using only alcohol sanitizer for disinfectant may not suffice, and we have got to use the soap and water for killing the spores of the Clostridium difficile. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to change the medical culture, or maybe it is easier to change the microbial culture. Say the commonest antibiotics they are prescribed, which probably are not required in 90% of the patients, are the antimicrobial drugs in acute rhinosinusitis or upper respiratory infections, which are most of are the viral infections. So when do we need to prescribe? At all we have to prescribe. Probably if the patient has persistent fever beyond 10 days, these are the IDSA guidelines. If the patient has fever more than 102 degrees with purulent nasal discharge or facial pain or tender lymphadenopathy, or patient initially has upper respiratory infections, which improves, which means that it was viral, and then patient deteriorates because patient has secondary infections. These are the only 3 indications when we should be prescribing antibiotics. So let us unanimously resolve that we will use antimicrobial drugs only when indicated. We'll choose the narrow spectrum and not the broad spectrum antibiotic. We'll choose the right drug, right dose, right duration, right route. We'll avoid the multiple dosages of the drugs which work on concentration killing, like azithromycin, levofloxacin, and amino glycosides. And we'll definitely give divided dosages when you use drugs like amoxicillin, cephalosporins, or carbapenems. We'll say no to all irrational combinations right from today. We'll reserve the quinolones for typhoid, tuberculosis, and selected infections when the culture sensitive reports suggest that these are the only drugs working, because they are one of the big assets for gram-negative infections, the oral drug. And no, by all means, no for viral upper respiratory and gastrointestinal infections. It's very, very important that we keep reminding ourselves about this. And if I'll just say that all of us, even if we withhold 1 or 2 prescriptions today, then for next 1 year, one person who is going to at least not give 500 prescriptions. And if we are 100 right now, that is probably to be more than 50,000 prescriptions we will be avoiding. So we use these drugs. We don't have to remember about the dose of the drugs now in these days of smartphones. When the phones are smarter, we should also be smarter. And we should be using the apps which are freely available, whether it's an Hippocrates, Medscapes, or drugs.com. There, the drugs, you go and you can scroll and you'll find it, which drug is safe in pregnancy. If the patient's creatinine is this, which is the drug we should be using. So we should be using this more often. And we must end with the European Antibiotic Awareness Day. They have said that get well soon without antibiotics. That is what we should be our motto. And then we have done our job. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a wonderful presentation. Prior to your presentation, I emphasized that while prescribing the antibiotic, the clinicians are least bothered about it's a side effect, but you very nicely explain it's really a myth, because as you explained that the microorganisms, not the macroorganisms, they are governing the entire society. And definitely, when we are prescribing the antibiotic, it causes the collateral damage. There are the millions, billions of the commensals. They are present in our body. They are majority. They are going to be affected with this excessive use of antibiotic or overuse of the antibiotic, and in turn, it may lead some more damages, even up to the Clostridium difficile like infections, which are very difficult to treat or may cause life-threatening infections. So, apart from this, there are many other problems when we are using antibiotic inappropriately. And we have Dr. Vipul Shah, he is an infectious disease specialist. I invite Dr. Vipul Bhai just to explain how this misuse, this overuse of the antibiotic may cause damage to the body, and overall they may cause damage to the society. So Dr. Vipul Shah.
Thank you, Urvesh bhai, for kind words. Very good evening to everyone. Before starting my talk, I would like to thank IMA headquarter, Gujarat State Branch, Dr. Paresh bhai, Dr. Mehul bhai, for giving this opportunity to share my views on a very important burning topic today regarding the antimicrobial resistance. Before starting my talk, I would like to say that I am using some of the prescription which has come across as a misused or irrational antibiotics. So forgive me for that. And the intention is very clear that I don't want to criticize anyone, but we have to have very good knowledge regarding the appropriately using the antibiotics to prevent the antimicrobial resistance. So let's start with the first case. I'm just giving the outline of the case, very short, very brief. 56 years old male admitted in ICU with hypertensive intracranial hemorrhage. Because of his very bad status, he was intubated, ventilated, underwent a surgery in the form of decompressive craniotomy. He has a long stay in the ICU and ultimately developed sepsis. And his blood culture from the peripheral as well as central lines shows the gram-negative bacilli. This is a case in 2013. So the organism was Klebsiella pneumonia, and it was producing the MC as well as the extended spectrum beta-lactamase enzyme. And if you look at the sensitivity patterns, all these on the left side of the drugs are resistant, and only the carbapenems were sensitive. This is from the so why are ESBL producing organisms are important, or extended spectrum beta-lactamase producing organisms are important? Really, because of the use of the inappropriately used cephalosporin, it causes increasing in clinical problem. They cause outbreaks, particularly in the critical areas like ICUs. Often they are multi-resistant to many different classes, and only few classes are left in the antibodies which are sensitive. And definitely it is associated with the increase in the mortality. So most likely cause of the resistant gram-negative organism, especially the extended spectrum beta-lactamase producing strain, is the widespread use of the cephalosporin, which has been used in a day in, day out practice with right and left hand for majority of the infection. Now, the story is more complicated. Like multiple antimicrobial resistance is often a characteristic of the ESBL producing gram-negative bacteria. So not only the one antibodies, many antibodies they are resistant. Not only the antibodies, but different classes are also resistant. Like ESBL producing, they are sometimes resistant to aminoglycoside, tetracycline, and all these drugs like fluoroquinolones. It was very beginning, the article in the New England Journal of Medicine, the antibiotic resistant bugs in the 21st century is going to be a clinical super challenge. If you look at the organism like E. coli, they are ESBL producing organism. Only the effective drugs are carbapenems and digicycline. If the carbapenems producing E. coli is there, then only the polymyxin like colistin and polymyxin B and digicycline is effective. Similarly, Acinetobacter organism, they are producing carbapenemases. So only the polymyxin drugs are effective. In the Pseudomonas, again, if they are producing carbapenemase enzyme, then only the polymyxins are sensitive. In 2006, this is the article of 2006, the resistant in non-fermenting gram-negative bacteria, multi-drug resistant to the maximum. So the metallo-beta-lactamases in the gram-negative bacteria, once they are produced, so all the carbapenems, they are also resistant. So only drugs which has been, at that time, it was just available colistin. So colistin can be used in a carbapenems resistant organism. Otherwise, all carbapenems were also resistant. Similarly, what Madhav bhai already elucidated, that NDM, the New Delhi metallo-beta-lactamase producing Enterobacteriaceae, and the treatment options are very much compromised by carbapenems. Only the polymyxin drugs are effective. Now I'm going, so it shows really these are the all cases of around 7, 8 years, 10 years back cases. Now, if you look at today, I had also come across the colistin resistant cases. So the last antibodies for the gram-negative bacteria, they are also going to be resistant if you are not using it properly. So going to the case 2, 45 years old, first time detected HIV positive patient. He was diabetic, no past or family history of tuberculosis, diagnosed to have a left tuberculous pleurophasion, referred to me for non-responsive to AKT. So he was on anti-tuberculous treatment for almost 2 months and he was not responding. So he was referred. I had looked at the treatment records. Now, if you look at the prescription, definitely patient have a COX pleurophasion with diabetic, HIV positive. Look at this prescription. The AKT FD, 1 tablet in the morning and 2 tablets in the evening. Now, I think that all you are aware that AKT FD is a fixed drug combination. So single tablet contains all 4 molecules, rifampicin, isoniazid, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. So once you are giving a 1 tablet, 1/3 dose in the morning and 2/3 of all the molecules in the evening, you can imagine the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics is totally different. So the level or the concentration level is going to be haphazard and bacteria or mycobacteria are going to be resistant. So this is very important that once you are prescribing the antituberculous treatment in a fixed dose combination, all the tablets should be taken simultaneously. Now look at the third number of drug. Injection streptomycin 0.75 gram, 1 IM daily. Now, if you look at this is a very clear case of tuberculous pleural effusion. So there is no need for 5 drug anti-tuberculous treatment. Only 4 drugs are sufficient. There is no mention in any guidelines regarding the use of streptomycin. So this is again a totally misuse of aminoglycoside, which is very important drug, and not only important drug, but sometimes the patient develops resistance to this. Then this resistance can be transferred to other patients also. So in this prescription, we have 2 misuses. The 5 drug ATT return not required, and the split doses of fixed dose combination is not required. Now going to the case 3, 28 years old male, pulmonary tuberculosis, no significant past or personal history, family history, father suffered from pulmonary TB and recovered with the first line drugs. His sputum was positive for acid fast bacilli, gene expert positive, rifampicin sensitive. So it was a clear-cut sensitive tuberculosis of lung. However, he was prescribed 3 weeks of anti-tuberculous treatment, but not improving. So sent to us. See the prescription. Now again, the same thing. Arsenex EZ is a fixed dose combination of all the 4 molecules in a single tablet. Again, prescribed once in the morning and once in the evening. Is not going to help. The second thing, the final is basically a levofloxacin. It was given in a 250 milligram once in the afternoon and once at night. Now, what are the prescription errors? Again, split dose of fixed dose combination. It is not required. Both if 2 drugs are to be given of Arsenex EZ, to be given simultaneously either in the morning. Similarly, the levofloxacin, which has been used in a 500 milligram in a split doses, at all is not going to help. In the contrary, it will going to be create a problem in the future. Similarly, the 5 drug anti-tuberculous treatment is not required, and even if somebody is using levofloxacin for one or other reason in a MDR tuberculosis, then for the tuberculosis, the levofloxacin dose is 750 milligram for an adult having a 50 kg weight or more than that. So this is totally irrational combination. The fluoroquinolones used in a primary sensitive tuberculosis is a crime, and nobody should attempt to get a crime. You know the punishment for in the future. These are other prescription. So in the same split doses of fixed dose combination, another company making 4 COX for the 4 molecules in a single tablet and given in a split doses. See this prescription again. I am really just burning my heart looking toward this prescription. For first 2 months, give AKT 4 plus L. Again, L is a levofloxacin. So 5 drug combination. What is the need of levofloxacin in this patient? Again, for 1 month, AKT 4. So extending the induction phase. Again, there is no need. For another 1 month, AKT 3, then AKT 2. Is this a rational prescription? It's totally irrational prescription. Let's see case 4. 31 years old male, 50 kg weight, history of fever since 8 days, dry cough since 5 days, X-ray chest suggestive of left lower zone pneumonia, hemoglobin was 16.9, count was 3940, differential showing polymorphs 68, 28 lymphocyte, platelet count was normal. So it was a clear-cut left lower zone pneumonia case in a adult patient without any comorbidity. Now see the prescription. What has been prescribed on OPD base for this type of community acquired pneumonia? See, tablet clarithromycin 250 milligram once 1 BD for 5 days and moxifloxacin 4 milligram 1 OD for 5 days. Now, if you look at the community acquired pneumonia guideline, very clearly in adult patient, if you are suspecting any atypical organism, then you would combine the azithromycin or clarithromycin along with the beta-lactamase or any penicillin or cephalosporin. This is a clear-cut guidelines. In this patient, if you go ahead of this, count were normal or below normal and polymers were only 62%. So I would like to say that this patient might be having a atypical pneumonia, but forget it. So somebody is not going in such a detail, but at least community acquired pneumonia guideline is very clear that either use the penicillin or cephalosporin or plus or minus clarithromycin or azithromycin, either of these drugs. But fluoroquinolones at all should not be used because it is a very important drug. Moxifloxacin is a very important drug for MDR tuberculosis. And multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, if you are wasting these molecules like levofloxacin, moxifloxacin in a day-to-day practice, then it is going to have a very big problem in the future. So again, the prescription error in this suboptimal dose of clarithromycin, again 50 kg weight, the clarithromycin dose is 500 milligram twice daily. In the contrary, using 250 milligram once BD, so it total 500 milligram per day. So again, suboptimal dose is the one of the important risk factor for development of antimicrobial resistance for that particular drug. No need for dual antibody combination like this in this pneumonia. And another important thing, before writing any prescription of antibiotic, one should think that this combination can harm this patient. Yes, clarithromycin and moxifloxacin have a significant drug-drug interaction, which can lead to the prolonged QT interval and may sometimes patient have ventricular tachycardia or torsades, and patient may die. And the cause of death is written patient having a community acquired pneumonia and sepsis and septic shock. But really, patient might have a drug-drug interaction. So before prescribing any antibiotics in a combination, look at also the drug-drug interaction. Case 5, 40 years old male, bilateral renal stone disease, bilateral disease stenting done for the hydroxyurea and hydroxyurea having a ureteric calculi. Prulifloxacin is already on the prescription. Because of the post-disease stenting, there is a fashion to give antibiotic. Develop high-grade fever with rigors, vomiting and bilateral frank pain on the prulifloxacin. So it was clear-cut developing bilateral pyelonephritis and switch to oral fosfomycin and nitrofurantoin. So this is the prescription. Fosfomycin 3 gram twice week for 4 sachets, and Niftas, there is a nitrofurantoin 100 gram once daily for 20 days. Now let me check one by one. The fosfomycin. Fosfomycin is a high-end molecule. Fosfomycin oral or sachet should be used only in the patient of having uncomplicated cystitis. Any complicated UTI. Now, before writing any prescription, you should have a complete diagnosis. This patient having a disease stenting, UTI, pyelonephritis. So it's a clear-cut case of complicated UTI. So in complicated UTI, if at all one wants to use fosfomycin, this has to be a IV fosfomycin. Never can be used as a oral fosfomycin. So fosfomycin in this patient is totally clearly unindicated. So that was the first prescription error. Second thing is nitrofurantoin. Nitrofurantoin again is a bacteriostatic drug. Nitrofurantoin cannot goes into the renal parenchyma. So any patient having a pyelonephritis, nitrofurantoin is not going to help at all in any situation. So this has to be keep in your mind that which drug or which antibiotic reaches to the infection site or not. Like nitrofurantoin, if it is not reaching into the kidneys, liver, kidney parenchyma, then how it can going to clear out your infection? So it is a complete misuse of antibiotics. So antibiotics should be thought of like a oil. It's a non-renewable resources and to be carefully husbanded. Now, all these cases, what I've seen, if such a prescription are going to be there is no way that antimicrobial resistance is going to be increased and increased. The drivers of antimicrobial resistance include antimicrobial use, misuse, and abuse in all sectors like human, animal and environmental sector. As Madhavi already said that antibiotics are used in many sectors, but what we can prevent or we can use judiciously is in the human as a clinician. Antimicrobial resistance is one of the most serious public threat today, and which has been accelerated by inadequate infection prevention along with the irrational use of antibiotics. The microbiologists and infectious disease specialists have long recognized the problem. Already again, the reputation, Sir Alexander Fleming discovered the penicillin, and within a few years, he drew attention to the threat of resistance from the underdosing, suboptimal dosing, what I had shown in some of my cases, that underdosing or suboptimal doses are real threat which can lead to the antimicrobial resistance. And many infectious agents that could once be successfully treated with any one of several drug classes have acquired resistance to the most, and in some cases, like Acinetobacter or like some of the other Pseudomonas and Klebsiella, virtually all of these drugs. The threat is more acute for antibiotics, but also threatened are antifungals, antiparasitics, and antivirals too. So before ending my talk, I would like to say again with humble request that antibiotics are life-saving drugs, and please do it, use it in a very right way. I'm just giving few examples. Right patient means before writing antibiotic on a prescription pad, think twice, thrice, 4 times. Is that patient require antibiotic? Example already given, like common cold, they are 90 to 99% viral in origin, doesn't require antibiotics. Right antibiotics, right antibiotic means when you are using writing any antibiotic, that antibiotic, the doses. The second thing is whether that drug will reach to that site of infection or not. The right dose, never give suboptimal dose. Even if you write antibiotic, do it in a proper way, in a proper doses. Right combination, already mentioned, only few combinations are approved by FDA. So whatever the pharma companies comes to you, taking with any irrational combination like cefizimine clavulanic acid, cefodoxime clavulanic acid, don't write it. Write only amoxiclavulanic acid, ampicillin sulbactam, piperacillin, ticagrelor clavulanic acid, and imipenem silasirin. These are the few drug combinations which has been approved. The right route you have to use and right duration. Even if you are writing a 3 days treatment for an infection which requires 7 days of treatment, then again is going to develop the antibacterial resistance. So with this, I am ending my talk, and thank you very much for patient listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vipul Bhai. So after a very nice presentation of Mahadev Desai sir and Vipul Shah sir, we have a little panel discussion. So we have a few important questions will be answered by both the speakers. Out of these 2 presentations, something is coming out as a conclusion that is very much definite, that this antibiotic resistance is a real major problem right now. That is one thing. And overuse of the antibiotic is now very much seems apparent reason attributing this development of the antibiotic resistance. So my first question to Dr. Mahadev Desai sir, what is the reason? What is the reason why they are so much overused right now? Still, why we need to go for such awareness program? Why it is common practice in clinicians to use frequent use of the antibiotic, and how this problem can be tackled now?
I think the answer we have already given during the discussion. Number one, that many of our own people also feel that antibiotics or a broad spectrum antibiotic is answer to all the, and first and foremost thing, the insecurity, feeling of being proved wrong or fail. There is one, and patients demand. Patients may demand anything. We don't have to just succumb to the patient just because he's demanding. And out of sheer application of time also, I would say that we have to give time, at least as a consultant level. You can't see 50 patients, 100 patients. I don't think I can even never think of seeing more than 20 patients in a day. So that also important, that you have to spare enough time. As I said that, yes, if you write antibiotic is just 1 minute and patient is happy, you are happy, pharma companies are happy, everybody is happy. But what is going to happen to that antibiotic when it's consumed over a period of time? So point is that if it is not indicated, it should not be prescribed, whether it is to our family members or to the patient or to anybody. Right. That's what we should resolve, that if it is required, then only it's required. And not prescribe antibiotics to the patients who have been in the hospital for 10 days with dengue infection. We have not prescribed. It's not required. Where is the need for antibiotics in dengue? Even if his patient is admitted with 50,000 counts, platelet count doesn't require antibiotics. So the point is, you have to be convinced about it. You have to have conviction. That is more important, right? That patients may demand, but if it is not required, it's not required. If the counts are very high, patient is toxic, patient is high grade fever, you can obviously see the infections parameters. That's a different story. But otherwise, we don't mean to say that if the patient has fever in dengue, they will not think of secondary infection. That's different. My point is, if it is a pure dengue, we don't have to prescribe. Malaria, why do we need antibiotic for the malaria patients? COVID patients, so many patients received, see, azithromycin story is different, that it was a repurposed drug. It was not given as an antibiotic. But now that we know, we don't have to prescribe now in 2021, either azithromycin or ivermectin or HCQS. Should we? No.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely. I remember almost 18, 20 years back, one of the top management from the AstraZeneca, actually, who has invented that meropenem, he asked the questions to the audience, which is the costliest drug, antibiotic right now. I am talking about 18 to 20 years back. At that time, one physician has wisely answered the question. Those antibiotic which is not going to work on the patient, it is the costliest antibiotic for the patient. It's not by the cost, but it is by the its effect to be chosen. Dr. Vipul Shah, sir, very well, and also, sir, in your lecture, you explained the microbiologist can play very important role while choosing the antibiotics. Sir, you have a wide experience, since last 35, 40 years you are working, and you have seen the microbiology practice in your initial practices, and right now it's quite different. So what difference actually you observe and what you think? And you may also convey some message to the macrobiologists, because many microbiologists are joined today. So how much interest they have to take in the clinical practice, and what advice you are to the clinicians, how you can have support from the microbiologist for proper use of the antibiotic? First, sir, what is your experience in last 40 years? How much this microbiologist practice has been changed, sir?
You're asking me or people?
Obviously you, sir.
Oh, sorry. I thought that
I am just in the practice since last 20
I thought
years.
that 40 years means it has to be me. That's true. See, microbiologists are initially, when I was a medical student or IMD, pathology and microbiology were together. So MD pathology means and the pathology microbiology. It's from there the things have changed, right? Microbiology, we have so many investigations are available, and it's totally a different branch by itself, and we can diagnose so many conditions in such a short period of time with convictions. Think of the blood culture for any organisms that we used to wait for days together. Then came the solid medium culture, then the liquid medium, and now we have got the gene experts, right? So we can get the diagnosis in such a period of time, short period of time. So the point is both sides. It's not clinicians and the microbiologists both have to talk with each other rather than just signing or not. In absentia, we should not be doing this. So if you are stuck up, you ask us. If we are stuck up, we should ask the microbiologists. It should be both sides. The traffic should be on both sides, that we have to involve microbiologists actively, and this should also come forward if they are doubt that this could be this or this. I remember one of my personal family members who had organisms when they were suspecting nocardiosis. Not a very common organisms. So we talked to 3 microbiologists and 2 agreed to that. And the third one has to be convinced that now you look again because the treatment is different. For nocardiosis, we gave antibiotics, sulfamethamine, trimethamine for 1 year, right? And whether it's a nocardia or there was a doubt of fungal infections, aspergillus infections. So ultimately all agreed, and then we went for the treatment and patient becomes absolutely fine. And we could stop and we could prove it by even HRCT that all infections were cleared. So the point, we need both, and we have only thing is that, see, what I will see that in practice, what we do at least amongst our physician colleagues, that I don't see all patients of infection same time, right? But the moment we see that this time probably the platelets are going less in the dengue or more less in the pre-Vivax, or these drugs is not working. So we keep talking with ourselves also, and same thing should be laboratories. I would suggest that the laboratories should also come out with the communications with the either IMA or the, what is that? See, this is what our collective observation is. Individually, we may not see so many patients. People may be seeing all infectious patients, but as a general physician, we don't see so many patients. So we should know what is the trend this year. This year, chikungunya, the trend is different. This year, the dengue trend is different. So that's what going to happen when the disease remains endemic. It keeps on changing its profile.
Yes, definitely. Vipul bhai, we would like to add something.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to add that I would request all the microbiologists that once you are reporting the culture sensitivity report to any organism, please convey the message to the surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, physician, clinician, or any clinician. That we suppose I'm just giving an example. If it is a MRSA, then don't use these antibiotics. If it is a GNP, then don't use these antibiotics, even though the culture sensitivity shows that drugs to be sensitive. So that message has to be go to the clinician. Otherwise, what happens? Once they see the sensitivity report, whatever the smallest, cheapest, and probably the easiest antibiotic they select, and then ultimately this is not going to help in the in vivo patient. So all the microbiologists request to, once you report a culture positive, then give some idea or talk to the clinician that these are drugs to be used and not to be used.
Yeah, so it's there should be the bilateral efforts to communicate with each other in any such cases for betterment of the patient. Now, a question to the Vipul bhai. There are the certain antibiotics which are you talk in already you presented that the certain antibiotic like quinolones which are restricted antibiotics. Which other antibiotic do you think that should be the restricted? Particularly, I'm asking in a day-to-day routine practices that should be restricted and should use only on the judicious, justifiable basis only.
So for me, each and every antibiotic, before writing, you should use your brain and think whether it is judicious or injudicious. But particularly for the fluoroquinolones, I am very much keen, and our infectious disease forum from Gujarat chapter, we are in very much awareing all the physicians and all the doctors regarding not to use fluoroquinolones in a routine day-to-day practice, except for the tuberculosis or certain situation where it is compulsory to use fluoroquinolones. Otherwise, avoid fluoroquinolones in all the prescription. Second thing, again, wonderful molecules, because it is available orally, use frequently linezolide. Again, a very wonderful drug for MRSA. So once it is confirmed MRSA and where the site of infection, where the drug is going to be there, then and then only use linezolide. Otherwise, don't use linezolide in each and every patient, because we've seen many surgeons and orthopedic surgeons prescription. They are giving combination of linezolide and cefixime, which is again a irrational combination. So once you are using linezolide, also use proper doses. Many prescriptions they are using 300 milligram BD in an adult patient. Again, it's a inadequate dose. Similarly, clindamycin 300 milligram BD, again very inadequate dose. So linezolide, fluoroquinolones, these are the two drugs, again very important, particularly to be used properly and judiciously along with others.
So just to add on this question, sir, we have seen many times this linezolid on the clindamycin, even on the OPD basis, they are used as a prophylaxis post-surgically. I don't know the prophylaxis post-surgically for 4 days, 5 days, for even for the clean surgery. So what you say about what kind of the message you want to convey the surgeons and orthopedic surgeons?
Very good question. Again, very good question. Perioperative prophylaxis. The word prophylaxis itself is suggestive of that to be used to prevent the infection, not to treat the infection. But most of the surgeon, I will say the 99% of the surgical branch, they are using drug as a prophylaxis, starting on the day of surgery, but continuing the same drug for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, sometimes 10 days, or even till the stitch is removed. So this is not prophylaxis, this is therapy. In a clean cut surgery, single dose, as already Madhavi has mentioned, that that drug should be reached in the blood in the proper level at the time of incision. So single shot surgery like lipoma, lymph node excision biopsy. So these are the very clean cut surgery. Even sometimes they don't require any antibiotic. But even if you want to give single shot antibiotics, but don't continue the same antibiotic in a 3 days, 5 days, 7 days regimen, because it doesn't make your purpose of prophylaxis. It is therapy. So, and that is a very biggest problem to have a in the development of antimicrobial resistance.
I think
I want to add something about linezolid. That linezolid, again, I am as worried about use of or abuse or overuse of linezolid as people said. That one thing is that is a very weak as far as the other than MRSA organisms are concerned, number one. Second, you can't give linezolid for a longer period. It's going to cause thrombocytopenia. Third, linezolid and tramadol are a very dangerous combinations. And that is what we use quite frequently as a painkiller. Now that we are worried about NSAIDs, we don't use NSAIDs. So we tramadol. But tramadol and linezolid will produce serotonin syndrome. Patient will develop fever and you think that antibiotics not working. So add one more. So keep in mind certain kind of drug-drug interactions like serotonin syndrome. Then it's very, very important we keep such things in mind. And it's an expensive drug. Why do you want to give when you have gotten more economical, easily means effective drugs available?
Then in continuation, again, sir, I will ask you the questions. As Vipul sir suggested that these are the not a prophylactic, these are the therapeutic when you are giving for long period of the time. So the same thing is observed in ICU also. Sometimes patient is on the ventilator and certain antibiotic gets started. So in ICU practice also, there are certain antibiotics should be used only in emergency, only there should be the restricted use, only with the justification. So which kind of the antibiotic I think you like to highlight here, that this antibiotic should be used only in emergency and only on the evidence based?
No, honestly, as rightly said, people, I would say that all antibiotics is only when it is required. So we have justification, that is one. And when you are using, I think it is better that we take the concurrence of either the infectious disease specialist or another physician before. Right? That is that much openness we should have. And particularly drugs which are our scarce resource like vancomycin or carbapenems, colistin, or the antifungal drugs that we just like that add, that should not be done. Definitely these drugs have to be kept. And see, there are certain ICUs where they have got the restricted use that they use for 1 month, they don't use aminoglycosides. 1 month they don't use certain drugs. So we can have that kind of antibiotic holidays. Problem is that is possible only when it is a ICU with a limited entry possible, right? It may not be possible applicable to all, but on our own we should ask ourselves whether we really need this antibiotic and for that as you extended period. Not all patients on ventilator need antibiotics, surely.
Vipul bhai, one more question. The sir has highlighted certain combinations, right? You also mentioned certain combinations which are inappropriately used. So which are the, again, just want to stress upon this thing, which are the fixed dose combinations should not be used, which are the irrational?
Yeah, two different ways to elucidate it. First thing is different antibodies are combined. Like as already said, in the market it is available like cefixime, linezolid, ofloxacin, onidazole, very, very well-known OTC drug, I can say. Then other drugs like ciprofloxacin, tinidazole. So these are all different antibiotics with a different PK and different PD. And again, same thing, Madhavi already mentioned that patient developing diarrhea in a 1 day or first day of diarrhea, it cannot be a amoebic dysentery or bacillary dysentery both. In the contrary, it may be not be out of this. It may be just food intolerance only. So no drug at all is required. Even if it is required and if you're very keen and it is confirmed acute bacillary dysentery like being a severe cramping, abdominal pain, fever, high severe watery diarrhea, and if you are thinking that it is really a bacillary dysentery, then only single drug. Why to combine with the amoebic dysentery drug like onidazole or metronidazole? In the contrary, it has a lot of problem. So this is again irrational. Second thing, what I am really afraid of it, using one molecule from the antibiotic like penicillin and cephalosporin and one molecule from beta-lactamase inhibitor like clavinic acid, tazobactam, sulbactam, and combining any out of this, and just put it in the market. So you have to look at the PK and PD. Some drugs are required BD doses, some require TID doses, So you cannot combine any beta-lactam inhibitor with any beta-lactam antibody like penicillin, cephalosporin. So all these CV combination like cephaloxime CV, cefixime CV, all these are, I would say that you should avoid in your prescription. And I don't know how the person can control the prescription of marketing of all these drugs.
One more thing, Urvesh. When we talk of drugs which are overused, I think a drug which is underused is doxycycline. It's a wonderful drug and a very good, inexpensive, and probably work for more number of patients, more conditions, right? So just because it's a probably poor man's drug, people feel that if I am as a senior consultant, if I prescribe doxycycline, patient will evaluate me. That is how people don't use it. But otherwise, doxycycline is grossly underused. And that is why
Yes, sir.
companies are coming out with doxycycline molecules.
We have observed in our laboratory also almost 80 to 90% of the MRSA, they are showing sensitivity to doxycycline. Even the Acinetobacter, multi-drug resistant bacteria like Acinetobacter, they are showing sensitivity to doxycycline and minocycline. So we may not go higher up to the tigecyclines. We have these two options. Even sir, quatrimexazole, Bactrim. Bactrim also showing very good sensitivity, even MRSA, even in ESBL and MC, Klebsiella and the E. coli. So there are the old drugs also, they kept their effect. Sir, just because we are short of time, the last question, which is also highlighted into the chat, that is something to say about the probiotics and the prebiotics. How we can use and how we can help to reduce the use of the antibiotic, or concomitantly with the antibiotic, what is the role of the prebiotic and the probiotic? Mahathir Desai, sir.
Yeah. See, the prebiotics and probiotics are totally different things. Prebiotics are the natural undigestible saccharides or carbohydrates. That is prebiotics. And when they are consumed, they are going to promote the organisms which are the probiotics, the helpful microbiota. While probiotics are the living organisms, whether it's an yeast or some of the bacteria which are non-pathogenic, and they will restore once patient is on antibiotics. So prebiotics are practically, I would suggest prebiotics are the natural foods. Whether all these tomatoes, they are prebiotics, right? Our lactobacilli are probiotics. Curd, yogurt, if you take, they are probiotics. So we should encourage these kind of foods, but certainly prebiotics and probiotics are going to have a big role in the time to come. We don't have validated studies to say that they are very good, except that probably they are good in antibiotic associated diarrheas. Patients with, but we have to be very careful. Not all, each and every prebiotic or probiotic is very good. If the patient has inflammatory bowel disease, patient has undergone gastric resection, or a patient of IBS, we should be very careful in using the prebiotics or probiotics. But on the whole, definitely they are the future, and we'll have more evolution of the specific probiotics. Probiotics, suppose there are lactobacilli are one, Bifidobacterium is one, then Saccharomyces boulardii, there is another one. These are all good time-tested probiotics, and they have definite help using the antibiotic associated diarrhea. They also improve the immunity because some of them are immunomodulators. They also improve the mucosal immunity, and they definitely restore the microbiota. So they are good, no question about it, but not for each and every patient that you need probiotics and prebiotics. And I think it's still an evolving field, but certainly they are not to be discarded.
Yes, definitely, sir. It is evolving, but one thing which conventionally used, the curd, is right now the research is showing it's a perfect combination of the probiotic and the prebiotic.
Yes.
Perfect, yes.
Because without a prebiotic, the probiotic is not going to start colonize and grow into the gut. They need the support of the prebiotic, and perhaps now the better quality of the curd or buttermilk, they are going to be proved a good combination of prebiotic and probiotic. So it was a very wonderful presentation. I think almost all part is covered in the presentations. We must thank again the Indian Medical Association and Gujarat State Branch for organizing such a wonderful CME. And I am very much thankful to Dr. Paresh Majumdar sir, Dr. Mehul Shah, the President Secretary of the GSB, for giving us the opportunity for this today's presentations. I am also thankful to Dr. Mahadev Desai, sir. It was a very wonderful presentation. Very nicely you elaborated all the things about the judicious of the antibiotic. And also thanks to the Dr. Vipul Shah. You really explained certain things which are real, which are not, I think, properly analyzed, and how the improper prescriptions may cause harm to the patient. Sir, Mahadev Desai, sir,
Yeah,
think.
I saw one of the questions in the chat box about the diabetic foot infection. So I think it's a topic by itself, but at least I can say that it's any infection in a patient with diabetes, we have to see very carefully and evaluate it. And first and foremost thing, what I would see is whether there is an osteomyelitis. Because there is one of the things that if the patient is diabetic neuropathy, the infection might have gone up to the osteomyelitis, then the approach is different. So that is one. Second, diabetes infections or foot infections are usually polymicrobial. So this is one place where we have got to use the broad spectrum antibiotics. But important thing is the debridement, good control of diabetes itself, and the diagnosis part, that whether the osteomyelitis is there, and then we should go ahead.
Sir, one more question. When diabetic foot sample is collected and sent to the laboratory, as you said, it's a polymicrobial, the many kind of the different organisms being isolated. So it is required to treat all the microorganisms with the systemic antibiotic, whether it is going to work, or simply the local antibiotic or local disinfectant will work.
Surely not local. Local antibiotic dressing may be enough, not enough, because we have to give. And what we do at least is we start clindamycin, which has an anaerobic coverage. Pending the reports, at least if one antibiotic that I have to use is either clindamycins, right, or metronidazoles along with the other antibiotics. So
okay, it was wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, sir, again. And lastly, I thanks the entire audience, because throughout the presentation, it remained almost full. That restriction was up to only 100 participants, and till the last 5 minutes, it remained 100 participants for entire presentation. So I thanks all the audiences. And also I thanks IMA headquarters, the IT department, for conducting very nice Zoom meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
thank you.